Okay. Let me talk about this assignment first, briefly. Then I will point to the little article that I wrote here that gives you tips on how to start your file. And then we'll move on to scanning. So we'll look at the scanning handout. And we'll also then, when I'm done with that, I'll stop the tape and I'll give you a demonstration of using the scanning. Okay, so I'm going to go to Perks classes. I'm going to click on handouts. I'm going to go to Photoshop. And there's three that we need. We need scanning basics, actually two, we need to pick them on. Scanning basics, we'll cover that in a moment, and assignment one, which is the postcard. That's where I'll start. Have any of you started collecting photographs for me to look at? You need to do that this weekend. Okay, so as we start this, I will do lesson 6. But for right now, knowing lessons 1 through 5, you should be able to do this assignment pretty well. What I want you to do is collect 4 or more photographs. You need a minimum of 4, and when we work with them, they need to be at a resolution of 300 pixels per inch, dots per inch, pixels per inch. Everybody should be able to use an image at that resolution. So if you take an image off the internet, be very careful, because most, 99% of the images that you see on the internet are screen resolution, which is at, you may know, 72 pixels per inch. That won't cut it. And if it's a small image to begin with, as soon as you change it to 300, it's going to become even smaller yet. It's going to become a tiny image that won't be worth anything. So you'll need to collect images from magazines, from books. If you have a digital camera, you're more than welcome to use images that you've taken yourself. If you've taken a photography class and you have prints, you're using traditional film, and you have prints that you want to scan, that is what we'll use the flatbed scanner for. We'll use those. The only images I think are worthwhile to get off the internet are if you go to Flickr. And actually, if you go to Creative Commons first and then find images that are licensed at Flickr, or licensed at Creative Commons and exist on Flickr, you might find some that are high res that are useful to use. Okay. So what you will need to do is you're going to create a composite digital image from all of these. What does that mean? You will need, think of a theme. Maybe it's a desert scene. So maybe I think that's the example that I used the other day. So you have one big image of the desert, sand dunes, and that's it. Maybe it's just sand dunes and it's a sunset or something, or it's during the middle of the day. Now you need to bring in other photographs and merge them together using layers, using whatever techniques that we've learned so far, so that when you're done, it looks like a single image, a single photograph. So if I decide to put a camel or a series of camels in the desert, I can get a camel. But what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to use the tools that we've learned so far, some of the selection tools that isolate the camel from whatever photograph you got it from, and bring it into the one with the one that's of the desert scene. Maybe you'll also get some images of pyramids. Okay, so maybe you'll want to put those in the background. Maybe you'll want to put a jet plane overhead. Maybe you'll want to put a person standing in the foreground. Who knows? You have to isolate them, each of those parts of the images from wherever you got those original images, and then merge them together with that original background. Okay? And when you're done, it should look seamless. It should look like a photograph. It shouldn't look like you pasted it together. And that will be the tricky part. It needs to be done in black and white. You don't need to deal with color. The final size should be about 5 by 7, and that can be vertical or horizontal. That's about postcard size. one of the last things is you must incorporate type somewhere. Wish you were here. I don't know. Glad you're not here. Whatever. You know, it could be anything. Welcome to, you know, my world. Whatever. Simple headline. Try to use some of the effects. Could be something as simple as a drop shadow. Okay. And then don't worry about the second part, which is the colorizing. That's something that at the end of the semester, if you want to do for extra credit, you can do. Any questions so far? No? Pretty sure? Yeah.
What's better to scan, a photograph or a slide if you have?
Doesn't make any difference.
See?
We can scan either one. We can. The question is, which is better, to scan a photo or a slide? If you have slides, we can scan them, and it will do a pretty good job. If you have a print from that slide, you can scan that too. And because the overall size is fairly small, the images in there are going to be pretty small too. Okay? Now, let me show you how to get started. And how you get started, if I go back here to my so even though I said you have an overall background image, you're not going to start with that image. I'll show you how. This is what I'm going to show you how to do. I have here tips for creating a new Photoshop document. So if you click on this, I encourage you to read this. And this will help you out, get started. So what I'm going to do now is sort of repeat what this says. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, then this should help to reinforce. Okay, with Photoshop open, let me hide this. Let me hide this. Let me go back to Photoshop. Until you get accustomed to working with images of different resolutions, you know, 72 pixels per inch, 300, in different sizes, and it gets confusing to you how to scale them and make them all compatible with one another, then this is what I recommend that you do. That you know that your image is going to be 5x7, for example. And looking at all of your images, you've decided, because we're going to do a landscape and we're going to do the image with the desert, and we're going to bring some critters in there, maybe some pyramids and things like that. Then, okay, I know that my overall canvas for my picture size is going to be 5x7. So in Photoshop, I'm going to create a brand new document. And we'll name it Desert City. That should be 1x. The width and height, I'm going to make in inches, and I'll make it 7 inches wide, 5 inches tall. So I know that's exactly going to be the printed size. The last thing that I need to pay attention to is the resolution, and that's very important. We're working at 300 pixels per inch, so that's what I need to type in, 300. I'm just going to leave the background white. I'm going to leave the color mode RGB, 8-bit color. The rest of this is just fine. And you can see, looking at the image size, it's going to be 9 megabytes. For a little file, you know, 5x7 card, that's a pretty good sized document. So if yours is 1 megabyte or less, then you know, wait a minute, something's wrong. Maybe I put in the wrong resolution or the wrong size. Maybe there's something wrong here. You need to check it. Click OK. And now I have a time, you know, when you look at this, it says 33%. If I come back in here under View and I show print size, this is the actual printed size. Now look at the rulers. It doesn't make any sense, does it? If I want this to be in inches, that's another way of checking your document. Go to Photoshop, Preferences, select Units and Rulers. Make sure instead of pixels that it's in inches. Now notice the changes, and you'll notice the width is 7, which is what we just specified, and the height over to the left goes from 0 to 5. So this is a 5 by 7, or 7 by 5 piece of paper. Now we can bring our other elements into this and see whether or not they work. So I know that I do have an image that's of a desert scene. Maybe it will work, maybe it won't. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to File, Open. And there happens to be one in the, shoot. Let me look in the hard drive. Let me look in applications. Let me look in Photoshop. I'm going to look in samples, and there should be one. There's a Dune tip right here. Well, this might be a pretty good one for a background image. I could bring in a camel, and I could put in, a plane in the back, and all kinds of stuff. And we look at it, and we'll see that, look at the size of this. It's over 8 inches wide. It's over 8 inches tall. It's okay, I could crop it, I could make it fit in here. Is this going to work or not? Can anybody tell me right now whether it's going to work or not?
The resolution is the same.
Is the resolution the same? That's $64,000 question. If I look at the bottom and I look at document size, this document is bigger than the other one, and look at how small the image is. It's only 1 megabyte. So that tells me that there's something different right there. If I hold down the Option key and I click on here, it tells me the resolution is 72 pixels per inch. So this probably will not work. But let's try and see what happens. If you start this way, it's foolproof though. If you started with this image, thinking this is my background image, and you're going to pile all the other stuff into this one, you will have gotten off to a bad start because you're working at 72 pixels per inch. And you can't, even though Photoshop will change it later, it won't work. All it does is guess. It throws more pixels in there, but it doesn't add to the detail. In fact, your image will look a little bit pixelized, it will look blurry, it will look like a number of things. It just won't look the same. So by starting your image this way, you can't go wrong. Whatever you bring into it, will fit in that format, will be at the correct resolution. Because anything you bring into this document, the white one, will automatically be converted to 300 pixels per inch. Does that make sense? So watch, when I take this one, this looks pretty good size. We're looking at this at 100%. Now I want to use the Move tool, and I click it over here, and I want it to be perfectly centered. So I hold down the Shift key, and I let go. That's how big it is at 300 pixels per inch. It converted that 72 pixel per inch image to 300, and that's what happens when you increase the resolution, is that the size of the image gets much smaller. So if I think to myself, okay, well that's okay, I'll go ahead and I'll zoom in and I'll just make it bigger. I'll hit Command P for transform, hold down the Shift key to constrain, and I'm going to make it much bigger, and it's probably going to make a liar out of me. But that's okay. It won't be the first time. Okay, so it's cropped nicely, nice desert scene, hit return. And it looks pretty decent on the screen, but I can already tell here, parts of this are starting to look kind of blurry. And the real test will be when you print it out. And I guarantee you, when you print it out, it's not going to look so hot. There'll be enough difference that it will not look that good. So I'm looking at this at 50%, and you can see back here, this is already pretty blurry. And when I look here, let's see if this is already, it's still a little blurry. No, it doesn't look half bad. So who knows? But if you follow that rule of thumb, it looks pretty decent. So it's going to make a liar out of me here. But you never know until you print it out, and you might find out it just doesn't look quite as good. And I guarantee you, I get a number of those every semester, and it just doesn't look that good. Photoshop tries to resample it, which means that when you go from a low resolution to a high resolution, it has to fill in pixels. And it tries to do that, it tries to match and figure out what would be best to go in there. And sometimes it does a decent job, and sometimes it doesn't, especially with people. With a desert scene, I got some sand and I got some clouds. Who's to know the difference? You know? But if it's a person or it's a camel that I'm looking for, whatever, it could have major problems. So let's find an image of it. You know, here's my next mistake. Let's go ahead here. Let me do a Google search here. I'm going to look up camel. Camels. Well, I'll just get one off the internet. Oh, there's a good one. There's a good one. You know, we have a bunch of them here. Let's look at images. You can find lots of camels. I probably have lots of camels. Oh, look at that. Cool. The white background. Couldn't ask for something better. So let's click here. It's a JPEG image. Looks like it's pretty good size. It's a little blurry though, which isn't a good sign. And so I'm going to right click and I'm going to do a save image as, or I can add my image to the iPhoto library. I'm just going to save the image as. So factory in camels. Save it on the desktop, because that's for me, not for you. Save it there. That looks pretty good. So I'm gonna close that. I don't need it anymore. Hide that. Now let's go here. Here's the camel. Let's open the camel in Photoshop. And now I'm going to take the image like we did with some of the others. I'm going to drag it over. That's how big it is. Now I can use the magic eraser. Where is it? And erase the background. You can see a little bit of a fringe. Probably don't want that. We're probably going to have to put, we'll deal with that on another day. Add a shadow. I'll show you how to do that on another day. Okay? So this is how you begin to put it together, but I don't know. This looks nice on the monitor, but I can see at this size, if this is already blurry, it looks nice when it's reduced, but I would want to do a test print. And I'm not so sure that this is going to work. Because I'm telling you that images on the internet just don't work that well. It looks pretty decent on the monitor, but as soon as you print it out, it's going to look a little blurry, a little pixelized and stuff, and they just don't look really crisp. They don't look sharp. It's really deceiving. Remember, we can also make copies of this. You can make a whole caravan of these guys. All kinds of stuff. Okay, so this is basically how I would approach the question.
Do we have to bring our own photo paper?
No. We have the paper for you, the print. We have a variety of different types of paper. We have coated paper. It will look pretty good. If you want really high quality paper, then you might have to provide your own, but we have some. And if it's done and used sparingly, carefully, we can allow for that. And you're allowed to print more than one. So here's 2 of my 4. And then when we're done, if we want, we can go to Image, Adjustments, and I can switch to black and white. I don't want just that one, I want everything. So probably what I would have to do first is I would have to flatten the whole image. I would probably save a copy first with all of my layers so I can go back and edit them and change them. And then the one that I go to that I change to grayscale, I would merge down a flattened image. So it's one flattened image now. And now I could go to Image, Adjustments, and switch to black and white. See how it changes it. Now, part of the problem with changing the color afterwards is look at the desert scene. Not too good, is it? Because the clouds are so dark when they translate, that blue translates to grayscale, that it really makes it difficult to differentiate the sand dunes from the clouds, especially over here. I would want more contrast. So I'd probably convert these to grayscale first before I merge them together. okay? And that is all doable. So this is the procedure I would follow, okay? Does that make sense? And then you bring your other images in. But I strongly recommend that if you use images off the internet, maybe you use Flickr, and you start with images that are 300 pixels per inch, not 72. Because they will look good on the screen, but the only way I will be able to convince you that something looks, that may not look so good at 72 pixels per inch is when we print it out. And it will, especially when you enlarge it, afterwards, it doesn't work. It's a big no. Okay? Any questions about the assignment? Everybody get an idea of, try to think of a theme. Doesn't have to be the desert scene. It could be something in Hawaii. It could be, I don't know. I like thinking of places I'd like to be, you know, for a vacation. So that becomes, you know, mental getaway. And then remember to integrate Python here somewhere. Doesn't have to be much, just a little help more. Okay, let's go back to my handouts. And let's switch gears now to talk about scanning basics. It's taking a moment to download. Internet here is really slow. I have a T1 connection, I've never known. Okay. How many of you have ever printed any of your photographs or documents using offset lithography? Anybody?
Using what?
Printed anything using offset lithography, meaning actually take it to a printer and have them use offset lithography.
Yeah.
It's the same technology that they use for printing this. It's the same technology that they're not inkjet printers. In order to print this, okay, what they have to do, and if it's what the kind of press that I think of, in the old days, it would be a huge Heidelberg press. Heidelberg press would be, with 6 colors, would actually probably be longer than these 2 rooms in one. They're big, maybe about these 2 rooms. They're huge, okay? And they take the photographs, the images that you provide, and they do what are called color separations. Because when they print in offset lithography, even like these inkjet printers, they don't print every little color. They only print 4 colors. They print CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And it takes your continuous tone photograph and converts it to what is called a half tone, which are a series of little dots. And when it's broken down into CMYK, if you want to see a green, then what is done is a blue dot is juxtaposed against a yellow dot. And your mind's eye blends those 2 colors and you see green. And they're small enough that when you look at this into a loop, you will see the little rosette. You'll see the CMYK, the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Okay, well, in order to print this, you have to know, and if someone's going to hire you to design a cover like this in Photoshop, and they say, we want you to design the cover, and we're going to go to press, and we want you to give us a Photoshop file. That's all we need. There's a couple of questions that you need to ask them. The first thing is here in my rules, you need to know the lines per inch that they're going to use to print this. That's not the same as dots per inch. They are related to one another, but it's not the same. You need to ask them, what is the LPI? And if depends on the quality of printing. This is probably like 130 lines per inch. It's a guess. Newspapers are like 87, 88, something like that. High quality art books are minimum 150 lines per inch. They can go as high as 200. Okay. It's similar to dots per inch. The more lines per inch, the higher the quality, the finer the resolution. But how does that translate? How do lines per inch translate into dots per inch? If they're printing this at 130 lines per inch, then that means that my image in Photoshop needs to be a minimum of 260 dots per inch. You double it. Okay? So if you're working on a newspaper, and they're printing at 87, 88, I forget now, it's been so long, 87, 86 lines per inch. And it's, even if it's going to be in color, it doesn't matter. Double that. So you only need to be maybe 160 pixels per inch or dots per inch when you're working on it. That's the highest that you need. If you work at 300, you're going to reduce it down anyway, the number of pixels per inch. And if you do that too much, that's not a good thing. It's the same as going from a low resolution to high resolution. Is that when they go from high resolution to low resolution, then they have to throw away pixels to make room. If they go from a low resolution to high resolution, Photoshop is adding pixels to fill in those gaps. And either way, it's guessing. And so oftentimes what will happen when you go from a really high-res image to a low-res image, and it throws all those pixels away in order to fit in that resolution and that format, then what will happen is, again, the image gets a little bit blurry, isn't as crisp as it was, just doesn't look as good. There is a degradation in quality. So that's one of the things that you have to know. So double that number to get the DPI, or resolution that you will need to work in Photoshop. To be on the safe side in our class, just always work at 300 pixels per inch. That's simple. And you'll get a high quality, high res, really crisp looking image. When you're working for the web, and I think I put this a little bit lower, you only need to scan, or you only need to work at 72 pixels per inch because you're working at screen resolution. The web is not meant to be printed. It's meant to be viewed on a monitor. So to work at any higher resolution doesn't make any sense because monitors can only display images at 72 pixels per inch, where on the PC 96. Why there's a difference, I don't know. Because one's a PC, one's a Mac. The next thing you know, which is really important pertaining to scaling, and this pertains to scanning an image on the flatbed scanner or your slide or whatever it is that you're scanning. You really have to have a pretty good idea of the physical dimensions in advance. Not precise, but close. If you're working with a 5x7 image, that's the postcard size, you have to have an idea. At least my images aren't going to be any bigger than that, are they? When you scan, you can increase the scale or you can reduce the scale of the image. But you need to know in advance what that's going to be, what the physical size is going to be, and that's the time that you change the physical size of your image. Not afterwards when it's in Photoshop. Even though Photoshop will allow you to do it, and there is some flexibility, it can resample a little bit and do a good job. But what you really want to do is to know in advance about the size that you need. And when you scan it, increase the scale there or reduce the scale as needed to give you the right size image. Okay? Next, and we'll see if we look back here, this is a photograph of what the interface will look like with the scanner that we use. But before you scan, you're going to go through all of these settings. You're going to go through the dots per inch. You're going to look at physical size. Everything is ready to go. And then what you'll do is you'll hit the preview button. and it will give you a preview of what it's supposed to look like. And then if it looks right, we're scanning just the area that we want. We're going to crop it as tightly as possible. Then we'll go ahead and click the scan button and we're ready to go. And because it utilizes a plug-in in Photoshop, it will open the image automatically in Photoshop when we're done. And then we can save it as a Photoshop file and we're set to go. Similarly, if you're scanning an image to place it in an existing Photoshop document, again, you need to know the physical size of the image of the document, and you need to know the DPI, or pixels per inch, dots per inch or pixels per inch. And that will give you a clue as to what physical size and what resolution you need to use to scan it in order to place it in there. Scanning's golden rules. Scan your image at the desired size, at the physical size, or a little bit larger. Not a lot larger, a little bit. Scan your image at the desired DPI, or a little bit greater, not lower. Not a lot. If you only need 72 pixels per inch, don't scan it at 300 and then change it to 72 afterwards. If you want to scan it at 100 and reduce it to 72, that's okay. Yeah.
On enlarging, like, is there a limit that you should enlarge?
It depends on the scanner. Excellent question. Does everybody understand the question? How much can you enlarge when you scan? The scanner will tell you it can't enlarge anymore. But that's as big. If you're starting with a little bitty, if you're starting with a really small image and you want it to be poster size, it probably will not do it. There are limits to what the scanner can enlarge or reduce, or well, it can almost reduce in infinite. But to enlarge, and it will tell you it just can't do it anymore. And then if you scan, enlarge an already enlarged image, that doesn't work too well. So sometimes you just have to find a different image. Is that clear to everybody? The scanner will tell you just it can't enlarge anything anymore. You never, never, never enlarge, change the DPI or the scale of an image after it's been scanned. If I scan it at 200 and I go, oh shoot, I screwed up, I need it to be 300, even though you can change it to 300 in Photoshop, don't do it, rescan. Even though I scanned it as a 4 by 5 image and I needed it 8 by 10, don't change it to an 8 by 10 afterwards, rescan. You'll notice, some of you may have used our CD collection before. We have a collection of, and you're welcome to use these for your project too. They're, it's like clip art, but it's not. They're from Image Bank. A variety of stock photographs. And oftentimes you'll see in there, it'll say large, medium, and small. It'll say high and low, or high, medium, and low res. So they've scanned them several different ways. One is a small image, high, medium, and low res. Medium-sized image, high, medium, and low res. Large image, high, medium, low res. So you don't use the big one for the small and the small for the big. You have to try to get close approximation from the start. It doesn't have to be exact, but close. You can, however, and this is also, it's kind of a misnomer, you can reduce the DPI or the scale afterwards, but again, minimize it. As I said, if you're scanning for the web, and you scan it at 100 pixels per inch, and you only need 72, not a big deal. But, if it's 200 and you drop down to 72, big difference. If you start with an 8 by 10 image and you only need a little tiny thumbnail when you're done, it will let you scale it down, but I guarantee you when you put those images side by side, there will be a significant degradation in the quality of that image if the scale and the DPI has changed too much. Stretch disk isn't so much of an issue anymore. Before we do that, know your, and that will just come in time, to know the limits of your scanner and your hard drive. And that's grow to the question that you asked. How big can you enlarge it? It's the limit of the scanner. There are drum scanners, there are all kinds of scanners that can have greater, ability to, or capacity to increase the scale of images than the little flatbed we have. But what we have does a good job. It really does. Remember that the DPI is 2 times the LPI, so that if you're working at 300 pixels per inch in this class, you should be able to print it in just about any line per inch that will be thrown away. If it was going to be, printed using offset lithography. As I mentioned, scratch disk isn't such an issue anymore in Photoshop. It used to be. And for every channel you use, it will increase the size of your document significantly. So RGB images have a smaller file size than CMYK, because you have that extra channel, extra file size. Also, when you have additional layers, when you have channels, when you have all kinds of other stuff, that will add to your file size. And what Photoshop will do is it will work from the RAM first, and however much RAM you have, it will use up that memory. And when it runs out of RAM, it takes free storage space on your hard drive and uses that. And that's where we get the undos from the history and stuff. If you're working with a 30 megabyte image, 5 times that is 150 megabytes. That's for a little bitty image. Imagine if you're working on a poster and you're talking gigabytes. They can get quite large. To get an idea of how large these images can actually be, I have a little table for you here. And this is for a grayscale image. Look at it, 72 pixels per inch, and 8.5 by 11 image is about 474K. At 300 pixels per inch, that very same image is 8 megabytes. Huge difference. Now, that's for grayscale. That's one channel. RGB, multiply this times 3, or CMYK, multiply it times 4. And that gives you an idea of how large these files will be. Now, I have on this second page some special rules. Special rules for scanning line art. 300 pixels per inch is more than what you need. Everybody know what I mean by line art? That's art that's comprised of just black and white. If you have an ink drawing where they use stippling, where they use crosshatch, that's line art. Okay? It's the density of dots or the density of lines that creates the illusion of gray. So there's overkill. You can enlarge those 200, 600%, and it will still hold up really well, because you're just dealing with a color. Again, special rules for scanning artwork for the web. At the very most, you want to scan your work at 100 DPI, and then you'll change it to 72 for the web. If you're scanning a printed image, most scanners, and ours especially, has something called the descreening filter. And it's something that you'll want to use, and that's something that I will demonstrate for you. It's really very nice because, remember I said when they convert the continuous tone photograph to a half tone, it's made up of little dots. Well, it will scan those dots, and especially if I wanted to enlarge her, make a nice big portrait of her, those dots get bigger too, and that looks pretty unsightly. It looks real grainy, it looks horrible. And what the descreening filter does is it actually tries to take those dots away and turns it back into a continuous tone photograph. And it does a pretty decent job. So if you're scanning an image that's already been printed, not in your photography class, not something that's a continuous tone print, but through offset lithography, then you're going to want to use the descreening filter in order to remove that pattern, that dot pattern. And I will show you what it looks like. We'll scan an image a couple of different ways so you can see what using the filter and what doesn't using the filter looks like. Okay. If you don't have a descreening filter, then there's some old, and I don't know of any of them that don't have it anymore. There's a way of doing that by using Gaussian blur and then unsharp mask. You go back and forth to blur the pixels, crisp it up a little bit, and that will take that dot pattern out of there. But most scanners now, even the cheapest ones, have a descreening filter. So that's something that we will use quite a bit. And again, that's from images that have already been printed using offset lithography, where they've been broken down into half tones. Any questions so far about the project? About collecting photographs? About the scanning process so far? No? Everything is real clear? Okay. I strongly recommend that you bring in more than 4 images and let me look at them. Even if they're digital images, let me take a look. My recommendation for choosing images is to make sure that they're adequate size. If they're already digital, that they're obviously the adequate resolution, and that they're crisp, meaning sharp, and that they have good detail, and that there's a good range and tonality between lights and darks. Yes?
Do you want to make more specific images?
You pick the theme yourself. It can be serious, it can be humorous, it can be off the wall. I don't care. What I tell everybody is, I like to be surprised. Come up with something that's like, wow, I wouldn't have really thought of that. That's really cool. Pick images that interest you. What kinds of subjects, what kinds of images are striking to you? What subject? Pick a theme, and that will be your theme. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're using the screening filter, it's anything that's been printed after, through a printing process, but not like say for example, if you go save on to photos back.
Yeah, no, those are continuous film prints. It's only through offset lithography. And when you look at this, my eyesight is horrible. But even as horrible as my eyesight is, when I look at this really close without my glasses, I can begin to see the little dots that make this up. And if you look at this under a loop, you will see this cyan, magenta, yellow, and black dots. Yeah, just bring it in. Bring your camera in. Already download them to a flash drive or a CD, whatever is convenient. Sure. Yeah, no, that's really the direction over the years that everybody's gone. That digital images are really the way to go. And with digital cameras, most digital cameras, even the high-end ones, shoot an image at 180 pixels per inch. And believe it or not, because it's already digital, it will translate to 300 really well. Why that is, I don't know. I still haven't gotten an adequate explanation, and I just don't know. I don't understand it. But I know when you scan an image that's already been printed, then the resolution is really critical. The size, the initial size you use, and the resolution becomes really critical. When you're working with digital images, you're saying from cameras that are digital cameras, it's a different animal. Those pixels in there, the digital data seems to be more flexible. There's a lot of leeway. You can start, and I've seen examples where people have used low-res cameras, by today's standards, 5 megapixel, and blown them up to these big, enlarge them. Do what I've told you not to do. Enlarge them afterwards and blow them up, and they're really quite stunning. They look really sharp and nice. And I don't know how it has all that data in there, how it's able to do that. The bottom line, is make sure is to periodically do a test print and see how it's coming out. And when you look and you see that one image in your project is really crisp and sharp, and there's a lot of detail, and the one of them maybe another one that you've used in there starts to look a little blurry, a little grainy or something, then something's wrong. Because it may look just fine. In most cases, it will look really good. It will look just fine on the line. And you won't be able to tell until you print it out. Okay? Okay, it's 1:30. Pretty good time to take a short break, and I'll get the scanner set up And then we'll do 2-3 demos so everybody's gonna have to scoot their chair around and gather around that computer. Okay? Unless there are other questions. Any questions about the assignments that we've worked on? If you don't have any images today to work on, or you don't feel you can go ahead, you can do research if you want. You can also move on to the next lesson, which is lesson 6. If you want to do that on your own, that's fine by me. And we're getting into masks and channels in lesson 6, which is pretty nice. Some really useful tools in there. Okay, we'll turn off the camera. And I'm going to commandeer this space, and then I'll do my demo.